I'd like to call Property Management Committee to order. First on the agenda is call the roll.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Dodd? Present. Commissioner Davidson?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Irving?
Here.
Commissioner Boyd?
Here.
Commissioner Anthony Johnson?
Present.
Chairman McAdoo?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, next, approval of the minutes. Vice Chair Anthony Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've read the minutes from May 25th and find them to be in order and move to approve.
Motion to approve. Any discussion?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Minutes approved. Next on the agenda is public comments. We have anybody in the audience that want to come up on public comments? We operate a little different in this committee. If you didn't sign up and you want to come up, that's fine, because we don't turn down nobody on this committee. Going once? Okay, thank you. Next thing on the agenda, one-stop update.
Commissioners, the Rutherford County One Stop, the building is now, it's approximately 99% complete. The punch list is complete with the exception of some minor cosmetic issues that the contractor is continuing to address. Any remaining issues that we have, we're going to roll those over. Those will be covered under our one-year warranty period. The HVAC unit that we discussed a month back, it has arrived, it's on site. The unit has been set, and the plumber and the electrician anticipate completing that tie-in by the end of the week. There are some minor electrical door controls, some issues that we're having with the programming on the glass storefronts. We're waiting for the contractor to get those issues resolved. However, this should not affect the KSA, the project manager, issuing substantial completion on that job. The FF&E has been delivered. It's all been installed. All systems and the controls are functioning now at 100%. I'm currently working with Murfreesboro City to acquire an additional signage permit for to help direct traffic and ease some of the confusion that the two different departments are having right now. They're already getting some traffic coming in, and people don't really know where to go. So we're looking for some directional signage that we're going to add to it. We're working with the state right now on that. I'll keep you posted when I get those permits approved and we get our signage approved. We have scheduled the janitorial services to begin on 8/1. If all goes well, I talked to the contractor today. He seems to think that we should have substantial completion by the end of next week. So that completes my report on the one stop.
Questions on one stop? Our public health and safety buildings update.
Sorry, just one
Go
brief.
ahead.
Adam, the substantial completion, does that allow for the C of O, or is the C of O beyond that?
Correct. We have to have that first, and we'll have full occupancy, use and occupancy.
Any other questions? Next, public health and safety buildings update.
The Rockville Public Health and Safety Building is at 99%. I mean, we're simply just waiting on the architect to issue that substantial completion as well. The punch list has been completed. We've confirmed the door, the security controls. They were finishing up testing today. I've been talking with Wilkie over in OIT. He seems to think that all the controls are functioning at 100%, so we anticipate KSA to issue substantial completion next week. Once the PBA turns the facility over, we will complete the installation of the epoxy floor system and we will switch out the key cores, put the final keys in, take full occupancy of the building, and then we'll begin to move the first responders into that building. The facility is currently under 24-hour video surveillance, 24-hour fire monitoring. An agreement has been made with the Board of Education regarding the perimeter surrounding the facility for landscaping and lawn care requirements. So everything is pretty much tied up here, and we're getting real close to moving in. We're working with the floor contractor to schedule that install. So that install for the floor system, that's the final and remaining piece before we can move first responders in. We're looking at probably less than 2 weeks, and we'll be able to occupy that building. That completes my report on Rockville.
Questions on Rockville? Commissioner Dodd?
Thank you. Adam, is the epoxy floor system a response to the floor not being acceptable? Is it a coating, a covering, or?
Correct. Well, originally the epoxy floors, it was in the scope, the original scope, and they tried to kind of reverse engineer the project and try to cut some cost. So going into it, the contractor was under the impression that it was going to receive the epoxy floor system. After they cut it back, they decided they were going to seal it with just a clear sealer. But the imperfections in the floor were unacceptable. So since we're still operating within budget and we still had available contingency, the PBA and as far as from an owner's standpoint, we decided that since it was a minimal cost, and we would go ahead and proceed with that because we thought that it would give it would be a better suited living space for the first responders. It would be more appealing to, I guess, citizens that come in and use the facility. It really, and there's some value to it as well. It not only does it look nicer, but it also protects the concrete at the same time from the everyday wear and tear. So everyone agreed that it was a good value to add the epoxy to inside the living space.
More questions?
Commissioner, that completes my report on Rockville.
What about Florence Road outbuildings? Oh,
Yes, sir. Kittrell Public Health and Safety Building, it is not far behind the Rockville location. That building is also at about 98, 99%. The punch list has been completed. We anticipate the project manager to sign off on that by the end of next week. Final inspections with the civil engineer are scheduled for Friday, tomorrow, the 28th. Once the contractor receives those documents, they should have everything in hand for permanent use and occupancy. The security and door controls seem to be almost complete. That testing is ongoing into next week. The only pressing issue that we really have associated with the Kittrell Fire Station is that we still don't have, AT&T hasn't completed their install of their internet services. And we touched on this with Rockville a couple months back regarding the locution, the security controls. That was one of the holdups we had at Rockville. The way these buildings are designed, and I had Chris, Mr. Clark, elaborate on this for you and send that to your, each of your PowerPoints. So the security controls on the doors have to function during emergency operations. So that's kind of why we can't occupy the building and we can't open those doors up for emergency purposes, which is its design, by design. So the architect has agreed that he won't issue substantial completion on the fire stations until all the door controls and the security controls are functioning and signed off on by pretty much everyone involved. So that's our holdup at Kittrell. The building itself is ready to go. We also have the fire alarm monitoring. That is scheduled for the week of 7/31 through 8/4. We could be, if AT&T can tie up this internet thing and we can get all those controls tested and they pass, we could be looking at a move-in date somewhere between the week of 8/21 and 8/25.
Questions on Kittrell?
Commissioners, that's inside the fire bay. And it's a salt guard coating you're looking at. That's the same salt guard coating that you'll see at the Rockville location. That's inside the living quarters, and that's also the tornado shelter. And that's the epoxy finish that Kittrell has. It was installed by the GC, and going forward, all the future fire stations will have that identical floor system. That's a shot into the living quarters. There's your kitchen area. Again, you've seen this. You've been, you've probably been to one of these facilities. They're identical. All these fire stations are identical. If you don't have any further questions, I'll move on to Las Casas.
Any questions on Kittrell?
The Las Casas project is moving along very well. Obviously, site work is ongoing. Concrete slab on grade is complete. They passed inspections. The septic tie-in work is complete. The electrical plumb-in, rough-in, it's approximately 90% complete. Concrete block work is already at approximately 65%. Within the next 4 weeks, we should be looking at seeing all the CMU walls completed, the electrical and plumbing rough-in complete. The raised concrete slab for the form, the mezzanine, we should see it being formed and poured within the next 4 weeks. The structural steel, heavy timbers should be delivered to site within the next 4 weeks, and then once they start setting the structural steel, we should also see some rough-in mechanical plumbing and electrical on the interior start to show up. So that's kind of what we're looking at currently and going forward over the next 3 to 4 weeks on the Las Casas project. So this month this is our first report on the Walter Hill. They finally broke ground. I know we missed it last month, but they finally broke ground, and they're, again, same contractor, so we're able to move back and forth between sites. They're able to mobilize their masons and their throughout each phase, they're able to move these subcontractors back and forth. So it's been very convenient, and it seems to be speeding the projects up. So that site grade is complete. Of course, additional site work is ongoing, but the concrete footers are complete. The sewer and gas line to the site is now complete, and that's where they had to run that through the elementary school to that site to tie in. Storm sewer is complete. The mason is mobilizing. There's block on site. The general contractor is also fully mobilized now, so he's fully equipped with temporary water and temporary electric. So that 4-week look ahead, we should start to see the block perimeter start to be informed. The underground plumbing and electrical rough-in should be in place and backfilled, and the contractor anticipates 35 to 45% of slab on grade within the tornado shelter within the next 4 weeks. That completes my report on the Walter Hill project.
Questions? Questions? Next, we're gonna look at Florence Road outbuildings. Oh, yeah, you need to.
Commissioners, if you remember back a couple months ago, we had a discussion about a home that was on Singer Road, and the county sold it, auctioned it off. We have found that not all the home was removed from the site, and there was quite a bit of construction debris, heavy, block, rocks, brick, HVAC equipment. The site's in very poor condition. They left the 2-car garage, cut the rest of the house off. You can see the footings piled up. All the other structures are still on the property as well. There's an open shed. There are 2 sheds. There's a barn. There's the barn. There's the open shed to your left. There's some roofing materials, plywood, posts, a lot of heavy debris. There's other miscellaneous items that are scattered across the property, so I guess I'm just giving you an example of what that site looks currently, so you can kind of have an image in your head as you discuss the property. And I do want to mention that you might or might not know that there were 2 homes on this parcel. So kind of more centered to this parcel, there was an existing home, and I don't know the exact date, but probably 3 or 4 years ago, I know the county sold that home as well first. And when I got up to that area, of course, it's very overgrown, so the pictures don't do it justice. But also the remains of that home are still on the site as well. So just so that you can have a total picture of what it might look like there. That is the original home, and the pictures that you saw in the beginning were the second home that was removed recently, sold and removed recently.
Adam, I got a couple of questions. It's my understanding is when we auctioned off that home for sale to be removed, part of the agreement, and Eric, you can help me out here, part of that agreement stipulated that when it sold at auction, that the buyer for the home was responsible for cleaning and removing all debris associated with that particular home, which included the foundation and the attached garage at that time. So what you're telling me, as of the time these pictures were taken, you haven't been out there today, have you? That's fine. No, that's fine. I just want to make sure. But at the time these pictures were taken, you're saying that while the structure has been removed, the debris associated with the foundation on that structure was still there, correct? Mr. Chairman, can we get Mr. Hennessy, because I think he's read this contract, can we get him to answer a couple of questions, please? Eric, was it not in the contract that the purchaser of the house to be removed also was responsible for the removal of the debris associated with that house?
So the quote-unquote house was defined to include all brick, all foundational brick, all fixtures. The two-car garage was specifically included in the contract as well as part of the definition of the house.
Okay, and they had until the end of July to move the house and the associated debris, is that correct?
No.
That is not, okay, please
So
correct me.
they had until, I believe it was July the 11th, to remove those items off of the property. It's my understanding that they asked for an additional amount of time, and they were told that as long, to get it off the property by the end of July.
Right, so we extended them an extension. So the amended agreement allowed them to go to the end of this month, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so they have till August 1 to remove the associated debris from the house from which they purchased, correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else about this sale that we need to be aware of? Because it did not include the outbuildings like the barns, correct? Okay.
The outbuildings were not included at all in the sale of this. I think they attempted to auction those off, and they did not get any buyers.
Okay.
I will say that I have tried for the last few days to contact this purchaser to see if he has removed those items since these photographs were taken, and I have been unsuccessful at getting an answer on the telephone, and I cannot leave a voicemail because the voicemail is full.
Okay. If you will do myself and this committee a favor, if you will drive out there tomorrow and just do a site inspection to see if anything's been removed, and then, of course, if it's not at the appropriate time on August 1st, then I think the County Commission and the Mayor's Office have a decision to make.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Johnson?
As of about 2 hours ago, it was exactly the same as those pictures.
Mr. Hennessy, based on Commissioner Johnson's remarks, I don't think it's necessary that you go out there tomorrow. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions concerning? Okay, next on the agenda, Forensic Center. Like to speak on the Forensic Center, including the mayor. So the way I am, first of all, let the mayor speak and let him bring us up to what happened in Nashville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. So we were denied the funding for the match, the 2-to-1 match, which was a complete surprise to me because literally up until just a handful of days before the agenda was supposed to go out, we were told by a majority of the committee and members of the administration that there were no issues and that everything was fine. And so I called, Commissioner Phillips, help me out with the dates again. You've already helped me out once, I believe. But I believe they were having a meeting on July 13th. Thank you, sir. And so I called senior advisor to the Lee administration on July 11th, and he told me, it's funny that you called. We've just put together the agenda in the last 8 hours, and Rutherford County is not on the agenda for the Forensic Center. We didn't lose the forensic center to another location. They just decided not to fund a 6th forensic center in Tennessee, which happened to be in Rutherford County. Again, I was surprised because our lobbyists have been working on this, portions of our delegation have been working on this, and all the feedback we had gotten up to late the previous week was that we were in good shape. I can only speculate as to what happens because I've not been given a clear understanding. Having said that, that particular facility was scoped at about 25,000 square feet, which was going to include a significant amount of that space to include educational and teaching, and for both a potential partnership with Meharry and MTSU. And so then after a little bit of soul searching over the following weekend, I called Denise Martin and I said, Denise, I want you to give me a pared down version for a forensic center that just meets the forensic needs for Rutherford County. And maybe a handful of surrounding counties to offset the cost, the potential cost, operational costs of operating a forensic center. And so Denise did that. We're looking at, and I'll let her, if you want her to come up and speak, she can speak to these details in just a minute, but that basically we're looking at something that's in the 12,500 to 15,000 square foot range with a cost of about $12 to $14 million, including FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And so because this is a public health issue, primarily, well, exclusively, and the fact that Rutherford County is the largest county in the state without a forensic center, and that includes the forensic center that's in Johnson City, which is a fraction of the size of this county, and the growth and the history that we've had in trying to achieve something. You know, I think this is an opportunity that we still should research and try to find if we can, if it solves a problem, and that's what this committee is responsible for, is there a need that this forensic center resolves? In my mind that it is, but that's the decision for this committee to make. And Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you for questions or answers, or if you want to bring somebody else up to speak.
Why don't we bring her up? I'd like to suspend the rule. Bring, excuse me, bring her up and let her explain what she came up with for a county this size. Got a motion? Have a second? Second, all in favor? Thank you.
Ms. Martin, if you would just give us also, if you don't mind, just start off with just a brief history, and then tell us, define the need and how the need became so obvious as a result of COVID, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Well, thank you all, and thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak. I will attempt to be brief, but I will ask for about 15 minutes of your time, because I do want to identify the issues that we are experiencing and why this has developed into a critical need. This is no longer a want. This is an absolute need at this point. So a history of how we've got to where we are. Rutherford County is required to send forensic cases to one of only 5 regional forensic centers in Tennessee, and that's per statute. That's per Tennessee Code Annotated 387101 A county medical examiner in Tennessee has to be a licensed physician appointed by the county mayor, who is responsible for investigating all the deaths in the county that is reported to them, and then making a determination of those cases as to cause and manner of death, as well as for which ones should be forwarded on for a forensic autopsy. Deaths reported to the county medical examiner according to Tennessee Code Annotated include deaths that occur suddenly when in apparent health, sudden unexpected deaths of infants and children, deaths of prisoners or persons in state custody, deaths on the job or related to employment, deaths believed to represent a threat to public health, such as the COVID pandemic, deaths when neglect or abuse of extended care residents are suspected or confirmed, deaths where the identity of the person is unknown or unclear, and deaths in any suspicious, unusual, unnatural manner, found dead, or where the body is to be cremated. If the county medical examiner determines an autopsy is necessary, the body must be sent to an RFC, or regional forensic center, accredited by the National Association of Medical Examiners named. That is by statute. Rutherford County cases, therefore, are currently sent to the closest one to us, which is the Middle Tennessee Regional Forensic Center in Nashville. And again, that's because it's the closest geographically to us. Medical legal death investigation to include autopsy performance is needed to provide accurate, legally defensible determinations of cause and manner of death. The medical examiner conclusions and reports can help prevent future deaths by identifying and reporting health and injury hazards and emergent diseases. Thus, is a valuable public health role. Autopsy findings assist law enforcement in determining whether or not a case was due to the actions of another. Collection of evidence from the body at autopsy can assist in successful prosecution in both criminal and civil litigation, and medical professionals provide necessary testimony in court proceedings in regards to the cause and manner of death. At an individual level, the diagnostic nature of the autopsy and findings can help a family understand more information about the disease or injurious process that caused their loved one's death. Rutherford County is the 5th largest county by population, soon to become the 4th, and in turn the 5th highest number of deaths on a county basis. With the exception of the designated metropolitan area counties, we are performing the highest number of death investigations as a county to include a very high number of drug-related death investigations. We are designated as a high-impact area by the Tennessee Department of Health as relates to fatal and non-fatal drug overdoses. Our death investigations in Rutherford County are not being managed as a priority. We are reliant on an out-of-county forensic center for our forensic services, a forensic center operated by a for-profit private company, and for one that we are not a priority. The company that provides Rutherford County with autopsy service has contractual obligation to Metro Nashville Davidson County as its medical examiner. It also contracts for the medical examiner services in addition to autopsy service for Williamson County. This company also services 51 other counties to include us in Rutherford County. We, as service counties, all compete for priority behind Davidson and Williamson. Due to the high volume of cases being handled by this sole Middle Tennessee regional facility, communication with its staff to our county medical examiner's office and law enforcement agencies is extremely limited. Pertinent case findings are not being communicated in a timely manner to Rutherford County law enforcement. This information is integral for law enforcement to determine criminal involvement, decision-making as to whether to proceed or change the path of a criminal investigation, or when, if, to appropriately close their cases. Delays in autopsy and toxicology reporting is detrimental to this whole process. Delays in examination and performance and communication with families can negatively impact timing of release of decedent's remains and in turn those final arrangements. Delays in examination performance can result in potential deterioration of the condition of the remains, as well as risk of loss of critical evidentiary material. Delays in death certification can have a detrimental impact on the civil litigation process and family needs, such as closing of estate or insurance claims. All of these delays are being experienced and are very real. Returning to a communication issue, or more accurately, lack of communication, autopsy findings are only useful if they are shared with appropriate authorized parties to include law enforcement and the decedent's next of kin, and this has to be performed in a timely manner. So I was asked to give an example so that perhaps you can understand the implications of how this can impede a law enforcement investigation. So this example is purely hypothetical. It's not related to any case active or closed. But imagine, if you will, a fatal fire scene. Decedent's remains are transported to the forensic center for autopsy. From the scene investigation, it appears initially that it would be the fire was due to accidental causes. The purpose of the autopsy is to accurately determine the cause and manner of death. The autopsy involves a physical examination as well as collection of biological specimens for toxicology testing and other evidentiary procedures. Toxicology results are typically received by the forensic center within an average of 2 weeks. The findings in our hypothetical case indicate that the decedent was deceased prior to the start of the fire, and there's a presence of an accelerant indicated. The findings in this hypothetical case were not evaluated at the time of the receipt by the pathologist at the RFC, or they were, and then they were not communicated by the pathologist to the investigating law enforcement agency. The law enforcement investigator does not gain access to the autopsy report until 4 months after the death and autopsy performance. He or she was not notified until weeks after the death certificate was updated by the RFC to state a final cause and manner of death. This cause and manner of death statement read fentanyl toxicity, and the manner of death was left undetermined. The decedent's next of kin receives a copy of that final death certificate before law enforcement is even notified of the cause and manner of death. The law enforcement investigation has now been delayed by 4 months. The potential for a criminal act in this hypothetical case could be arson and homicide. This was not known to law enforcement for 4 months. I'm sure you can understand the impact of how this impedes their investigation based on this timeliness issue. Again, the circumstances of the case was purely fabricated, but I will tell you the delays and the impact are very real and have been seen. Further, we have no control of our budget. We have had 3 substantial fee increases within 3 years. Each time we were given very little notice by Nashville, and the increase became effective mid-fiscal year. Given this historical, we can anticipate future increases to these fees to continue in the years to come. Further, we have no control over our case data. Our own case data access is restricted by the vendor and its proprietary and commercial case management system, a system that is now antiquated, has limited auditing and tracking capabilities, and there's no analysis reporting capabilities at our county level. Rutherford County has no morgue. One of the local hospitals graciously allows Rutherford County to use its morgue as a de facto county morgue with storage for only about 12 bodies, but this includes the hospital and non-medical examiner cases. This morgue is under hospital care and control, which is not ideal for forensic evidence control or maintaining a chain of custody of the bodies or evidence. The county has no permanent surge capacity body storage, which is critical for any mass fatality event. The region and state are also in the same dire position. Thus, we cannot expect support outside of Rutherford County. To give you another hypothetical but real-world example, in 2015, first responders ordered an evacuation of residences and business in a 2-mile radius where a train carrying a chemical called vinyl cyanide caught fire. This occurred after midnight in Maryville, Tennessee. Around 5,000 people had to be evacuated. The single-tank car on fire was loaded with vinyl cyanide, described as a probable human carcinogen by the EPA, and is a colorless, flammable liquid. Both cars on either side of this burning rail car additionally contained this chemical. Vinyl cyanide had vapors that can explode when exposed to open flames, so a potential for fatalities from fire and explosion, in addition to the fact that vinyl cyanide is poisonous by inhalation, ingestion, and skin contact. An instance such as this would have the potential for immediate mass fatalities, but due to the nature of the chemical threat, many deaths may be attributed in the days, weeks, and even years later. All these deaths require tracking and then connecting. In 2016, in Rutherford County, we had a commercial semi-truck carrying swimming pool cleaning supplies, chlorine, oxidizers, and other corrosives. It crashed into another vehicle. Multiple neighborhoods were evacuated, and residents advised that wind could potentially pose a danger as it pushed toxic air from the crash site. From our own EMA internet site, you can read the following, and I quote, "Large numbers of hazardous materials are transported via interstate, highway, air freight, rail, and pipeline across our county daily. A minute number of these are involved in accidents in any given week. Rutherford County has over 30 miles of major interstate with as much railroad, on an average 30 rail transports and 8,000 tractor-trailer transports across the country on a daily basis, all of which carry some form of hazardous material. This does not even include personal vehicle travel or other commercial transport. There also exist several industrial concerns over manufacturing processes, storage, or utilization of hazardous materials on a daily basis, end quote. If there was an immediate need to respond to a mass fatality incident, such as a commercial plane crash, a train derailment, a manufacturing plant catastrophe, a bus crash, or a mass shooting incident such as the recent tragic events at a Nashville school, Rutherford County is not prepared. We have no appropriate facility to store the decedent's remains in a respectful or controlled manner, and no control over the timing or quality of the necessary forensics examinations or the timing of the ultimate release back to families. We have no control over how and when information is to be released. The Nashville RFC would likely be quickly overwhelmed by a mass fatality incident or other surge in deaths in its own county of jurisdiction due to its high regular daily caseload. An outside county that the facility provides autopsy services, i.e. Rutherford, cannot rely on mass fatality assistance from the Nashville RFC. There exists a single point of failure in the Middle Tennessee region as it relates to forensic autopsy services and the medical examiner system. If the state-owned building that the company operates out of fails, or the Regional Forensic Center loses its accreditation, Rutherford County and 52 other counties will have no resource available for forensic services for the foreseeable future. The other RFCs do not have the capacity or capabilities to assist during a mass fatality event, nor do they with our regular cases from this region or our county. It is also logistically impossible for Rutherford County to send our cases to one of the other RFCs due to their geographic locations and distance from us. If there were quality issues with any of the RFCs, accreditation to that facility could be suspended or revoked. And as a reminder, it is a statutory requirement that forensic autopsies only be performed at a name-accredited facility. If there's an issue with quality, if an issue with quality was to be found, this would directly reflect on Rutherford County since we order our cases through them. So I promise this is my conclusion. Improvements in services and expertise, productivity of other investigative agencies, faster turnaround times of reports and information to law enforcement on criminal cases, and judicious use of county resources are all vital considerations. Forensic services provided in county would directly improve quality and timeliness, be of significant benefit to law enforcement productivity, for example, officer attendance at an autopsy, and improved access to medical legal case information. It would positively impact families not having to endure their loved ones' remains being taken out of county and reducing the time it takes to examine and release. It would reduce the county cost of transporting bodies to an out-of-county regional forensic center. It would lessen the burden on our funeral homes having to transport decedents' remains back from Nashville. By taking control of our medical examiner system, current monies being expended on forensic service to a for-profit, out-of-county vendor would remain in this county. So that's my maybe not so brief overview. Does anybody have any questions?
Commissioner Dodd?
How many deaths, how many autopsies are we doing a year?
I would say we're doing, this past year, about 330. The gold standard is to be considered 1 per 1,000 population. That's the recommendations from the Scientific Working Group for Medical Legal Death Investigation and the National Association of Medical Examiners Office. Typically, we don't realize quite 1 to 1,000. We are a very diverse and mixed population. We have rural as well as urban. So we're doing the appropriate number, but the gold standard or the recommendation would be about 1 to 1,000.
What would that be?
well, based on our population, I think we're currently at 362,000. It should be about 362 a year currently, but it's going to increase. Sorry.
How many investigations resulted from autopsies?
On average, we do about 170 death investigations every month, and out of those, about 30 of those would go for autopsy. My math isn't that good.
In the 170 average, there's something in the autopsy that pointed to further investigation.
Right.
And then 30 of those, average, 30 of those
About an average, about 30 would go for autopsy.
were sent to law enforcement and a case was pursued.
Yeah. It may or may not involve law enforcement. There are certain cases that are purely a public health inquiry, so law enforcement are waiting for those results, but they may not have an active investigation open. It just depends on the case. I would say about a third of the cases are drug-related deaths. We will have several suicides, unfortunately. We may have a couple of homicides, unfortunately. There may be just that we do not have an explanation for the death, but they may not rise to law enforcement involvement at that stage.
Is there any statistic or that would suggest we're missing cases, that we're missing, that your hypothetical we thought was an accident was a fentanyl murder, whatever. So is there...
I would say, unfortunately, there is a potential. Currently, we are working with a very limited medical legal death investigator crew. About 2/3 of every day is covered by our EMS shift supervisors, who are doing a very valiant job, trying to do a full-time death investigator job on top of their full-time duties as an EMS supervisor. But their role, their training is for saving lives. It's not to be a death investigator. So in what we should be doing, at least at the very least, is having a full crew of death investigators working 24/7.
Mr. Chairman, Denise, can you follow up with that a little bit with Commissioner Dodd and that conversation we had, which was in my office earlier today, which I was unaware of, about the potential for missing something because we don't have the death investigators as a result of the forensic center, and so we don't have them on 24 hours. They're not 24-hour available, and the potential there for missing something because we don't have the people trained in investigation to ascertain the clues, as I think you called it, determining whether or not this should be there should be an autopsy done. Can you explain that a little bit? Because that's kind of a follow-up to what you were talking about, if that's okay.
Yeah, a medical legal death investigator is an extension of the medical examiner. So they are specifically trained, and that's their full-time job, is to examine the scene and examine the body alongside law enforcement to determine whether the decedent has died or is consistent to have died from natural causes, or whether it rises to the level of having an autopsy performed. EMS supervisors or paramedics, by law, are allowed to represent the medical examiner's office if approved by the medical examiner, as ours are. But their training is in saving lives. Their base training is not in death investigation. So when we have 2/3 of the day having a paramedic respond out to death, it's not optimal. It's a bit like asking an RN in an ER to respond out to a death scene and do the duties of a homicide detective. They don't have the time because they have all the other duties as an EMS supervisor, straining their abilities to perhaps do it as thoroughly as a medical legal death investigator would. So there's myself and 2 other investigators that are not only trained, but this is our job that we have chose to perform. Obviously, with the supervisors, this isn't a choice. This is a duty out of necessity. But obviously, we can't cover a 24/7 shift. So there is, a big portion of every single day that we do not have a trained death investigator out on scene. Did that answer?
Answer your question, Commissioner Dodd. Other questions? from Irvin?
Yeah, thank you. I think the mayor said that the state only wanted 5 or 6. Correct me as to the number. And one of the questions, since the state appears to not want to be involved in this one, at least currently, does this forensic center have to be accredited by the state? And if so, I don't know the answer. What would the criteria be, since at this point they don't seem terribly interested? So I don't know exactly how to ask that question necessarily, because the mayor may have some additional insight. But I'm just trying to figure out, if they only want 5 or 6, we want to add in one. How big a hill is that going to be?
So,
If it's going to be one.
yeah, so it's not that the state wasn't interested. These were federal funds that were passing through the state that the administration was administering from federal funds. So that it was a competitive environment financially, and we were unsuccessful in that competition from the financial portion. It's not that we were unsuccessful in the state being interested. Indeed, I was told subsequent to that there might be an opportunity for us to receive some supplemental funding in the next session, which is great, but as everybody in here knows how the General Assembly goes, what is promised in August or July sometimes doesn't come to fruition in April or May of the following year. And so if the state does come alongside next year, there's plenty of opportunity, and I, for one, would welcome that. But Commissioner Irvin, it's not that they weren't interested in adding a 6th forensic center. They weren't interested in using the federal dollars that we were asking for to fund this forensic center as it related to other projects that were competing for those same dollars.
And that's fair. Do these have to be accredited?
Yes, by statute, it has to, a facility for performance of forensic autopsy, it has to be accredited, but it's not by the state. It's by the National Association of Medical Examiners Office, National Association of Medical Examiners, which they use the acronym NAME. So they have a completely separate accreditation criteria. They would inspect the facility. And as long as there's a whole checklist of things that that we would have to abide by, but they accredit facilities as small as 1,500 square foot up to 100,000 square foot. So the state has no say-so, as it were, in whether you establish a forensic center. So they don't have any, there is no control. The State Medical Examiner's Office has no jurisdiction over the regional forensic centers. They currently self-police.
And is one of the criteria need for whether they're accredited, or is it totally separate?
No,
okay.
Completely separate.
Okay. So Rutherford County, you indicated, is 330. And surrounding counties that could potentially feed into this forensic center, what's the estimated number of autopsies that they are currently performing?
I would say they are lower than they should be, and quite often it's due to budget constraints. And it just depends on essentially which counties that may be interested in using a facility that's based here in Rutherford.
I mean, I'm just trying to see a sense, do we have, because there's been Rutherford County and then there's been tossed out periodically, well, we may be able to pull some additional counties in. And I'm trying to get a read on, is that 1,000 autopsies? Is that 500 autopsies? Just staying focused on the need piece. Okay, I'm trying to assess, we've got 330, someone else, the other 5 counties, 6 counties, whatever. If they only have 50, that's a problem. If they've got 1,000, is this the proposal going, the scaling back, going to work?
So if I could help answer that question a little bit, the challenges that Rutherford County is experiencing in Nashville are being experienced by 52 other counties across the state. There are 95 counties in the state. Forensic medical and Nashville services 53 of those. And so the same issues that Ms. Martin has outlined in defining the need and the problem don't just exist here in Rutherford County. They exist in the other counties as well. The difference between Rutherford County and Bedford County or Marshall County or Murray County or Grundy County or Lake County, if you know where Lake County is, that's how far away they go. That's Reelfoot Lake, by the way. The difference there is that Rutherford County has the resources and the ability to do something the other counties do not. And that is the bottom line. We have the ability to take care of our own, take care of ourselves. And if there's an opportunity to mitigate the cost of this facility by making our services available to surrounding counties, we would do that.
So we don't have a projection as to a number. I'm just trying to get a sense just to focus on it for a second.
No, there's no projection, Commissioner, because that projection would be grossly premature based on the size and scope of this facility. I will tell you this, when we originally scoped this facility for SSAG approval, we scoped it at servicing a population of 1 million people, which was anywhere from 10 to 12 additional counties. Within that proposal, I reached out to a number of mayors who I know personally that I served with in the General Assembly, and I've met through the County Mayors Association, and there was some interest. But obviously, there was some genuine interest on their part because they, like us, were experiencing a similar problem. And we were creating bandwidth, if you will, or both in quality and in time for dealing with a troubling issue, which is an autopsy. So I believe that there's opportunity there to mitigate costs, but I want to caution the County Commission, and that's not the business of government. The business of government, in my humble opinion, is not to find profit centers and make money. It's to serve our constituents and our citizens with the best way we can. In the course of doing that, if we have opportunities to mitigate costs, we try to do that. So this is a very secondary thing that we're discussing, important, but nonetheless secondary in my mind.
Okay, so the two closest, I presume, would be Nashville and Chattanooga?
Chattanooga only services Hamilton County. They do not so they are classified as a regional forensic center, but our next closest would be Hamilton, but they do not service anybody other than Hamilton. So our next, outside of at the Nashville office, our next closest would be Knoxville or Memphis.
Okay. And you raised a number of issues regarding responsiveness, access time, things along those lines. Is Davidson at full capacity? Okay, so
They're beyond capacity, in my humble opinion. The SWIG MDI, the Scientific Working Group for Medical Legal Death Investigation, and the National Association of Medical Examiners recommends you have about 10,000 square foot for every 500,000 population. The Middle Tennessee population alone is about 2.8 million. They are servicing beyond the Middle Tennessee. I think the Middle Tennessee region itself is 30-something counties. They are doing 53. So they are in a 20,000 square foot facility. So they should, with a 20,000 square foot facility, only be servicing Davidson County. But they're doing 53 counties outside within a 20,000 square foot facility.
Okay. Hey, going back to the list of responsiveness access times, can you give us a sense for how those would improve if we had our own? In other words, my understanding of autopsies is that sometimes they take a couple months anyway. You may not be able to provide it. So I'm trying to get a sense for, and I think you'd mentioned 4 months or something along those lines. And so I was trying to get a sense for, does this improve the time to, well, to what? Leave it open.
Yeah, absolutely. I strongly believe that timeliness of those autopsy reports are going to improve drastically. And that's because we would be dealing with a much smaller number of autopsies, much more easy to handle number of autopsies. We'd have the ability to communicate better. A large part of the communication issues that are being experienced is because they're dealing with so many cases from so many different counties. It's physically impossible to have the time or fiscally impossible to have the amount of staffing they would need to be checking on these cases on a daily basis. So these results, like you said, yes, it typically could take anywhere between 60 to 90 days for the conclusions to be made. But that doesn't mean there's not pertinent findings that are coming in that have to be provided with the understanding that the final cause and manner of death has not been ascertained, but they're pertinent findings. For the hypothetical I gave you, for law enforcement to know that there was an unexpected finding, and at that around 2-week mark would have put them further ahead in their investigation than obviously waiting 4 months for the final report to come out. So if Rutherford County was the priority, which it would be with a facility here, those dialogues and those conversations should be happening on a regular routine basis. And I will tell you, about 10 years ago, that was happening with the Regional Forensic Center. And I know that because I was there. So, I absolutely am confident of my stating that, yes, these things will not be seen. These improvements with time, case turnaround, with report turnaround, with the final cause and manner of death being added to the death certification, all of those things will absolutely improve because we will be dealing with a finite number and Rutherford County will be our priority. We are not priority now. We can't be. We're not expected to be. Davidson County and Williamson County are their priorities, and then we're jostling for position with the other 51 counties.
And if I could add, I don't think Ms. Martin said so, but she speaks from experience because she in a previous life, she worked with forensic medical. So she's quite familiar with their procedures and the processes and the challenges that they had before she came to Rutherford County.
Let's see, you'd mentioned the fee increases, and this is the only financial related thing I'll ask, but you'd mentioned it from a certain number to a certain number now. Could you elaborate just briefly on where they are now?
We're at $2,300 per autopsy, and that is significantly higher than what the other RFCs are charging. I think the next highest out of the RFCs is $1,900 per autopsy. In 2020, we were paying, I believe, $1,825. 200 and then another 275 per autopsy.
Okay, thank you. And then mass casualty came up. And the one question I've been asked, okay, more than once in the past couple of weeks, okay, if we had one today, okay, what's the plan?
I'm sorry, I missed.
What is the plan if we had one today?
If we had a mass casualty event,
Yes.
I would like to be able to give some confidence to that. I know and I trust our first responders and that how they would respond to it. I have no concerns there. We had our small mass casualty or mass fatality event when we had the plane crash back in 21. And I was in awe of how our first responders were able to act, but that was a limited number. I am not so confident in regards to death investigation and handling of those decedents if we were caught off guard today or tomorrow. We do not have anywhere to take them. Davidson County can't take them. There is no other facility that could take that many bodies in one go. So unfortunately, I can't give you a very positive answer to that because we do not have anywhere, nor does the region, nor does the state.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from. So that seems like it should be a priority that would tend to lend itself to a process along these lines, or addressing it one way or the other, a mass casualty event. What would be the target number? Presumably, right now it doesn't sound like there's much of a plan. There is a somewhat, okay, but if there was a target number we'd be looking at generally, and then also address it in the context of this new forensic center, what would we be planning for with the new forensic center? How would that augment, change, whatever, kind of the general number we need to plan for, and then the number that's being considered in the forensic center?
When we were first looking at doing a mass fatality, part of the state proposal, we should be looking at about 150 body storage capacity. On a regular basis, we should be looking at around probably 50. But
I'm sorry, 50 or 15?
50. With the ability to hook up refrigerated trailers, which obviously isn't optimal to use on a regular basis, as the facility in Nashville have been doing. But for a backup for mass casualty or mass fatality, the ability to securely place a refrigerated trailer, which we do have ownership of in Rutherford County, that would give us the ability to hold about another 60 for temporary, and that would only be as a resort for a response to mass fatality.
And then the forensic center would augment that, or how would that tie in to the mass casualty event, the forensic center?
Having a forensic center?
Yes.
Well, obviously we would construct or design the forensic center to have the capabilities for body storage and having the ability to secure and hook up a refrigerated trailer. So that would give us a centralized place to operate as a morgue, as what is, comes part and parcel of having a forensic center. So it will give us the ability to have that response capability for sure.
So there would be a forensic center and a morgue.
They're combined. You don't have a forensic center without a morgue, put it
Okay.
that way.
Okay, that's fair. I even got to a discussion this week.
If I could jump in for a minute, Commissioner.
Well, I wasn't quite finished.
Yeah.
I even had a conversation with a constituent about what's the difference between a forensic center and a morgue this week. So, it's one of these things that it does come up, and I'm trying to get a sense for, the forensic center versus the morgue and how those two work together generally and then with mass casualty.
Well, we absolutely need a morgue, for sure. We don't have one. But, we absolutely need a forensic center for the reasons I hope I've explained. So by having the forensic center, you would have the morgue along with it. But the morgue is just purely for body storage. in a forensic setting, it's, you know, it's not only taking in those decedents that haven't been claimed, so it's a temporary storage situation where it may not lead to a forensic examination, but you absolutely need a morgue in order to hold those decedents, you know, until the forensic examination can take place, and then release them back into the morgue for further release onto a funeral home. By us using the one at the hospital at the moment, it's under hospital control. It is not ideal. It's not suited for holding, even on a temporary basis, a case that's intended for forensic examination, and that contains, you know, along with forensic evidence.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any more questions of her? Commissioner Phillips?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Martin, I can't remember the year, but it was like 6, maybe 7 years ago, the idea of a forensic center was introduced right here in 5. And there were representatives from some department out of Nashville encouraging us to pursue this with their help. What was the name of that department, and
It was the State Medical Examiner's Office.
where do they stand right now?
They stand very supportive of us. They have voiced both directly with me, and I believe to the state, to the Commissioner of Health, which is the State Medical Examiner's direct boss. From my understanding, the Commissioner for Health is supportive too. They have recognized that we have not had an additional forensic center in over 20 years, despite the exponential growth in Tennessee. They've recognized the need to have another option. They've recognized the need because we have a single point of failure, and that if that office was to fail for whatever reason, we had a bomb in Nashville not so long ago. You know, buildings do fail, you know, but accreditation can be removed too. So, you know, they certainly recognize the need to have another, and they've certainly recognized how busy Rutherford County is and how large population-wise and how diverse we are in Rutherford County, that this would be an ideal location for it.
I really appreciate your persistence in doing this over the last half a dozen years or more. The project has been slow, and you know, we're coming to a point, a decision-making point. That decision would have been a lot easier if funding would have been approved through Nashville. That State Medical Examiner's Office that you just mentioned, there is no help, financial help, that we can get through them. Let me just, if I could, just for a second. Years ago, when Rutherford County was nowhere nearly as large as it was, we didn't have a juvenile detention center. We grew, and we needed a juvenile detention center. It's not going to be a profit center, although we accept juveniles from outside of Rutherford County. Those that we receive from outside of Rutherford County help offset the overhead for operating that. I look at this as very similar to that. The need that we have in the county was similar to what we had years ago for a juvenile detention center. So other counties that are surrounding Rutherford County and send their juveniles to us for detention, it's kind of a similar situation to that. Just to follow up with that, the need that we have right now, there's a lot of commissioners that are going to want to know the cost. And I'm sure we're working on that. The cost of the building, what it's going to cost, the operational cost on that, and as opposed to the cost that we have in sending those out, and how much difference there is. That will probably be the biggest decision that we will have to make, is whether we want to spend that additional cost, and then forecasting something into the future. What if the surrounding counties sent autopsies to us? Would we be in a position to start charging to make money, or would we be in a position to help those counties as it related to just offsetting our cost and not trying to make money off of that? Those are the type of things that I think most commissioners are going to want, and I'm sure you guys are working on that feverishly as we get into this decision-making process. What's the cost? What's the future operating cost of that? And then the potential that we're saving from not having to send our autopsies out, but also receiving those that are back in. I'm sure you're working on that.
Absolutely, Commissioner. Yes.
Very good. When do you think those things will be available to us, that information?
If this proposal comes out of property management, we expect to make that presentation at the next budget meeting.
Wow, that's pretty quick. Very good. Thank you. Once again, I'd like to commend you and all of the work that you've put in on this, and I can imagine your disappointment on the 13th when that item was pulled off of the agenda. I'd like to know what that explanation was, but there's a really good chance that we'll never know. But I once again continue to appreciate the work that you're doing, and I think this is something that a lot of commissioners wants to do. But as we get into the decision-making process, the information that you put together for us or help us put together is going to go a long way in that. In essence, forecasting not only for the next year, 5 years, but the next 10, 20 years in the future, and how this regional forensic center would not only help out Rutherford County, but provide a service to Middle Tennessee as a whole. Thank you.
Any other questions? Martin? Mr. Dodd?
Thank you, Chairman. Did I just hear you, you anticipate a motion approving what tonight to go to budget?
All we are looking for right now, we can't make a motion. We're not in session. As soon as we come in session, this committee, like other projects that we've had, all this committee can do is specify the need. Specify the need. We've done several projects in the past where we have specified the need. Once we specify the need, we send it to budget. We're not asking for this committee to come up with a way to fund it. All this committee can do is specify the need. And if you want examples of this, what we've done in the past, he brought up a good one, juvenile detention center. Another good one, judicial building. Another one we looked at, one stop or whatever you want to call it. And we've had other projects. All this committee can do is specify that we need it. Once we specify that, we'll vote on the need, send it to budget. Not asking this committee to do anything but that tonight, because that's all we're supposed to be doing. We don't do the cost. We don't do the cost overrun. We don't sit and try to figure out how we're going to pay for it or whatever. We specify the need. Now, when it goes to budget, the budget committee can put in the funding or how we're going to pay for it or different things like that. And if you got questions on how it's going to be funded, that's budget. Either budget can send it to the full commission. But in the past, and I've been on this committee for several years, I've been on this commission for several years. And all during my tenure, and Commissioner Johnson can speak for it also, is that this committee is going to vote on specifying the need. And once we specify the need, we can send it on the budget. But as far as cost overrun, other information like that, we're not in no position to do that. And we do have other people that would like to speak tonight. And on Commissioner Irvin, some of his questions he was asking, I know Mr. Huggins back there was chomping at the bit because he definitely could have answered some of those questions. And he's scheduled to present his opinion tonight also. And Commissioner Reed is scheduled to present his and anybody else. But I know that a lot of the questions that I heard come up tonight have been discussed in the past. And Mr. Huggins was a forerunner of our emergency management system, and he can definitely answer a lot of these questions on the need. So if we do not have any more questions for Ms. Martin, I would like to bring Mr. Huggins up now, answer some of them.
One question for Ms. Martin. How many deaths in Rutherford County? Not autopsies, how many deaths?
I promise I will get that information to you and correct any inaccuracies. I want to say that there's about 4,000 deaths a year. I may be wildly off because I haven't looked at that spreadsheet today, but I will certainly get the numbers of deaths per year to you for sure.
Did that percentage of autopsies to percentage of death, does that correlate to you? That
it's appropriate for our population size for sure. And again, since we are the 5th highest in population, perhaps when the final census comes out, we will be the 4th highest in population. Those numbers are reflected in by the number of population. We were in line with the typical number of deaths in our community for sure. About half of those deaths are reported in some manner to the medical examiner's office, and we do a varying degree of investigation from scene response to some hospital evaluation with the medical staff at the hospitals, nursing homes, hospice, through to, it's very different from expected deaths to unexpected. We deal with the ones that were unexpected, so.
Thank you. Mr. Huggins, Commissioner Dodd, if you want that question answered again, Mr. Huggins will have the information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to introduce myself to the committee that doesn't know me. My name's Carl Hudgens, and I was the previous EMS director, and I retired after 32 years of service in 2022. And everything that Denise said is 100% accurate and correct. The reason I know this is because I've been working on this for 18 years. And I knew that there would be a day that Rutherford County would be in the position that it is now. 18 years ago, I wanted to protect Rutherford County because we wasn't in an emergency situation like we are now. Nothing was ever done. We've been proposing this for a long time. There's nothing new about it. We just have different people we're presenting it to now. So Denise was hired to me because I used to do what she did while I was working at the ambulance service. Well, the ambulance service is the largest department in the county that's not ran by an elected official. It's a very busy service. It does bring in revenue, but it does not pay for itself. It's impossible for a 911 service to profit. And if it is making a profit, then you're going to have a lot of audits by the feds and you're going to be in trouble. So EMS doesn't make a profit. But to get back to The reason I hired Denise as director of the ambulance service, the more calls we were getting, because we're averaging 3,200 to 3,500 calls a month. On top of that, having to investigate deaths. Impossible to put 100% time into investigating a death and run an ambulance service at the same time. And it's not fair to the people, to the families that we're serving. And Rutherford County is required to provide this service. Whether if we like it or not, we're required to do it, just like we're required to provide law and fire. Same way with death investigations. Now, I'm sure some of you have managed companies or managed your own business and all that. I've been doing it for a long time, and I had standards that I expected out of our employees. And we also use vendors, and if they didn't meet the expectations and the standards of Rutherford County, I fired them. That's basically what my recommendation is for Nashville. They're not providing the service, and we're better than that. And when you're sitting here dealing with families wanting to know why, you know, their loved one's been sitting up there for 5 days and hadn't been released, I don't have an explanation for that. But I do know that I'm responsible for it because they're actually working on behalf of Rutherford County. And I'm really, really concerned that if we don't go off on our own, Rutherford County is going to be paying a big price. And that's pretty much it. I will tell you this much. I was hoping that since the pandemic was over, everybody's eyes were open. Chairman Pettis Reed on Public Safety Committee can back everything up I'm saying. When COVID first hit, I was having meetings pretty much every night, conference calls with state and federal agents, and it got down to Rutherford County. And at the beginning of COVID, it was predicted that Rutherford County would expect 35 to 53 deaths a day. That's a day. Now, from where I was sitting, that's some bad news. And what are we going to do with all these people? We didn't have nowhere to take them. The hospitals can't handle that. The funeral homes can't handle that. But I knew it was Rutherford County's responsibility. And so we had to think outside the box, and we had a temporary morgue that was set up in Smyrna, and I had 3 refrigerated trailers lined up for that. Not just for autopsies, but just to hold people. And thank goodness it never came to the point that we had to use it, but we come extremely close. And I mean very, very close. I'm talking about we had to do some maneuvering to keep from having to put people in those trailers because the hospitals were overwhelmed. And he's made a very good point. Rutherford County is not prepared for any disaster that happens in this county. We have 2 major interstates that run through this county and a railroad system. You got the co-op in Laverne, all that fertilizer and feed. Any of you farm boys, you'll know what I'm talking about when one of them things go. Now, to the co-op's credit, they have a very good safety program, but things happen. You got Pillsbury and Riches over here. If you knew how much ammonia they have for those refrigerating refrigeration systems over there to scare you to death. That's why they have a windsock there on the building, so you know which way it's blowing if they have a bad leak. And it's not if it's happening, it's going to happen. I just can't believe it hadn't happened yet, and if it does, we're not prepared. So at the end of the day, I believe we are at a point, like Denise says, it's an emergency. And I'm afraid if we're not prepared, we're going to pay for it deeply in the long run. I do want to thank Mayor Carr and Commissioner Pettis-Reed and Chairman McAdoo. They have been on this and with this from the beginning, and I hope that Denise has answered all your questions. She presented it well, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Like I said, I'm retired, but I'm still a believer in this because it needs to be done. So if you have any questions for me, I would be glad to do my best to answer them for you. But I really want to stress the seriousness of the situation that we're in right now.
Questions? No questions? Thank you, Mr. Huggins. Next, we'll call on Commissioner Pettis-Reed.
Commissioners, your subject has been covered well by the two individuals that have come up here, and they've done an outstanding job. I've had the opportunity all the way going back from, I'll say, 2018 of working with these two individuals and exactly what we're talking about tonight. You know, this is nothing new to a county commission here. I went back to some of my old files and pulled out a copy of what we have already presented to the county commission. In fact, the dates that was on this one right here was actually printed in December of 19. And it says, an opportunity to establish a flagship state-of-the-art forensic center in Rutherford County. Well, we were getting ready, and we did present some of this in February of 2020. I stood up here and told some of the same things that you've heard here tonight about what we wanted to do. In fact, we can go all the way back into Mayor Burgess's term. The white pages were written then for Rutherford County, and Carl, who stood up here, is the one who actually wrote those white pages to begin with. This was known about as that what we were needing here in Rutherford County going back that far. But they never made it to this floor. They didn't make it until 2019, 2020. But first part of 2020, we make our presentation, we say what we are wanting to do, and then if any of you remember, on March 13th in 2020, a call went out that the first case of COVID hit here in Rutherford County. And I see some individuals sitting back here on this seat. If you'll remember exactly where you were that day, we ended up here in this courtroom. If you had been a county commissioner, your phone would have buzzed. I was standing in Publix out here on Highway 96. I had a cart full of groceries that would have possibly melted if I knew where I was headed. I ended up pulling a styrofoam cooler off the shelf, went by the ice, threw it in there, bought my groceries, and headed up here, not expecting what I was going to hear. But we were in a pandemic, and we're trying to determine what we should do here in Rutherford County. That evening, as had been mentioned here before, is what Carl says. That very evening is when we first started trying to figure out what to do if we have those deaths. In fact, on that day, Clark was elected as our first public safety director. Now, that's the way to start your job, isn't it? Possibility of losing this many people in your own county, but that was his job. He had never taken off that suit he'd gone through his interview with. He was still sitting that night when we were down there doing this. But we went through that pandemic. We learned a lot of things. In fact, Rutherford County became I'd say the pilot county out there, or the beacon county, because the state of Tennessee picked what we were doing here to protect our county and told all the other counties in the state of Tennessee to follow their lead, and they did. Because we were protecting our employees, who were protecting our citizens, and at that time, we didn't have an employee to become sick from our ambulance service. They were looking after everybody else. We went to other counties to help them out. So that's what's going on there. But the whole discussion, as all of this was going about, if we only had some way to deal with what's going to happen to us, that's when we come up with all these other ideas out there. What are we going to do? I see some of you sitting here from Smyrna. You know, it's mentioned up here about a morgue, the difference between a morgue and a forensic center. I remember hearing commissioners say, well, we have the morgue to take care of all of our problem, I think. And somebody said, where is the morgue? Well, it's over at the hospital. Somebody said, no, it's not. It's down at, and then all of a sudden they said, we don't have a morgue. And we don't. We don't have a morgue. But we created, at that time in 2020, a makeshift morgue in Smyrna at the airport down there in a hangar. And if you had gone with Denise and Carl and myself down there to inspect that, to finalize it, and you opened the doors and walked in, I thought I was walking in on the set of a MASH production, because that's what it was. It pretty much was that way. But that's what we had at that time. But this is not a new discussion. Following all of that, we went about talking about a forensic center. We presented it again to the county commission. We were on our way. We were going to try that in the State Farm building out here. That was another place that we thought we could build this. But once again, our hopes were dashed, I guess is what you could say. That didn't happen because of money, of buying that facility out there. But in this business, and I think some of you that are new commissioners have already learned that if you're depending on grants, they don't always come. I mean, that's just a part of it. You know, if we were delivering Christmas toys, we would be very bad at it because we just couldn't get them there all the time. So a lot of times we have to do what we need to do for the county. When you're just talking about the deaths that we have here in Rutherford County, and I think we were mentioning here just a while ago, if other counties kicked in, I was looking back at this, what we presented back in 2020. At that time, in 2018, Rutherford County had 238 deaths, or 238 autopsies. Other night, it was just reported 328, I think's on here. You looked at Bedford County in 2018 had 37. So if you just double that to now, they'd have about 74 or somewhere around 100. You go on down the line of who would possibly come in with us. You'd have Bedford County, Cannon County, Coffee County, Marshall County, somewhere. When you total it all up, we're pretty much close in pushing that 1,000 number, if you had these other counties around you trying to come in with you. But the only reason I'm up here tonight, I guess, is to give you the history of what has come before this and where we are now. Plus, I've got to tell you, I call myself a water boy for forensic centers. I've carried this water bucket for a long time, and I carry it now in whatever way we can do to have this opportunity. Yes, as Carl has said here, are we prepared? And we're not. I sat not long ago down at the farmer's market in Smyrna. And you know where the farmer's market is in Smyrna, right there on the railroad track. And in fact, I had a booth down there for the Historical Society right next to the railroad track. And every time that train would come by me and those wheels were right over here, and I'd look up and this big tanker car was going by, and I'd always wonder, What's in that tank? Well, that's where we are here in Rutherford County. We have an X drawn on us. 840 crosses I-24 in Rutherford County. We don't know what comes down those highways. We really don't. And when you check that railroad, it's there too. We've had a plane crash. Only 7 people are involved in that. But I want to tell you, and I'm just giving you this as history, that very day I ended up over here in dispatch watching our people work. And I think you've talked about, do we have a plan? They had a plan that day, and it worked like clockwork. I've never seen anything quite like it. I sat there and dispatch and listened to everything that was going on and how it went, how it worked, and how they had it totally set up. So I think we have the people that will attempt to do this right here, but yet we are sitting here at a time when we're sitting at the station, but we don't want to continue to stand out there on the platform watching it all go by. It's time that we sort of react, and that's just coming from me as a citizen of Rutherford County, as also as commissioner here, and I guess you would say as an old man getting ready to reach 3/4 of a century. I just don't want to go off and leave it where, hey, it's not going to happen today. But this is the history of what we have done here before with the Forensic Center, and we're back. Any questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dodd, you got a question?
Does this go through public safety in any way?
It came through public safety, and at that time, if I had to say we were going off in a direction, we were asking for the finances more so than rather the need. Are we talking about the need? And the only thing that got discussed the other night was a possibility of finances. And at that time, we did not have the information that any of the mayor had. We just basically were presenting it. And basically, they basically passed a motion to allow the mayor to come back later and present that information. That's all there was.
Got a question?
Shouldn't this come from public safety to property management? Shouldn't public safety be where
It's
this
already on your agenda.
comes from? But
Should it be?
we're talking about a building. They're tasked with need or emergency response, whatever.
Well, we'll still be doing that.
But I'm just curious why it hasn't come through public safety first with a positive recommendation to budget or to us. That's.
I can give you an example, if you want an example. We had the public health and safety buildings, and we didn't wait for public safety to approve it to send to us. We brought up the public safety buildings. We didn't know how much they were going to cost or whatever, but we knew it was a need there. So you can check back with the minutes. When we passed it, we sent it to budget. In public safety, they were discussing the safety buildings. When they passed it, they sent it to budget. Now, if that's just one example that we've had in the past where we have sent buildings or whatever that were brought up to us directly to budget. But I guess if you wanted to, you could offset it and say you want to send it to budget and back to public safety or something like that. But final task would be to go to budget. Now, if you want to send it to public safety, you want to send it to health and ed, because you got health and ed discussion in it, with the morgue and all that good stuff. It's up to us. We can send it wherever we want to, but one place we got to send it, as far as I know, is the budget. So if the committee want to send it anywhere else, it's fine. We'll make the motion and we'll send it wherever. Commissioner Phillips?
In my mind, what happened at Public Safety the other night is that the Public Safety asked for some financial information that was not gathered, so it's back on the agenda for our August meeting. So it's already, it's going before Public Safety next month. I think the decision, the same information probably that'll be at budget will go before Public Safety next month. That's what's going on in my mind. This committee is charged with just making a decision for the need. And then it'll go to budget, it'll go also to further conversation at Public Safety within the next 4 weeks.
If I may.
Yeah.
So I think some of the confusion can fall on my shoulders, Commissioner Dodd, because when it came before Public Safety, it also was to define the need. The financing, the money, any cost analysis associated with the Forensic Center, any other endeavor this county undertakes belongs in budget. I allowed myself, unfortunately, to get, and I should have known better, and I didn't catch myself in time. I got drugged down a cost analysis rabbit hole, that discussion that didn't belong in Public Safety any more than it belongs in here. That belongs in budget. There's a delineation in responsibilities between the committees that I did not follow, and so that's why the confusion. So the confusion, the discussion in Public Safety revolved only and exclusively around financing and cost benefit and making a profit and revenue and pro formas and business analysis. And quite honestly, I was unprepared to have that discussion because of the public health need that belongs in Public Safety. And it's my fault that I should have said, no, we need to confine the discussion to the Public Safety's need for this particular type of facility in Rutherford County. Chairman McAdoo put this on the calendar last week prior to that discussion, just so you understand the chronology of events. This agenda was made up, Chairman McAdoo, it was late last week. Was that? Yeah, so there was no, Chairman McAdoo insisted on, he called me, he says, I'm going to put the Forensic Center on the agenda. And I said, well, it's already on Public Safety. He said, I know that. I think it belongs in Public Safety because we're talking about a public building that needs to be funded, and that belongs also in facilities management. Property management. So that's a little bit of the history there. So some of the confusion I think you're kind of addressing is my responsibility.
I'm terribly uncomfortable considering the property management taking a $12 to $14 million building, 12,500 to 15,000 square feet, and promoting it to any department without Public Safety vetting the need. I just don't feel like this committee's in the business of entertaining these professional remarks. They were professional and obviously well thought out, and they've been going on for a few years, but I just don't see why. I'm not going to make a motion to that effect at this moment, because I want to hear from Mr. Johnson, but we're not in the business of Public Safety, and this is a Public Safety concern.
Okay, like I brought up before, feel the way you want to feel. All I can do is go by the record.
Chairman?
And the record is that public health and safety buildings did come before us, and the mayor at the time was Mayor Ketron. Came before us. Am I right, Commissioner Reed? Came before us, just like this is coming before us. I didn't send it to Public Safety, and it was a minimum $33 million project. I send it, well, we did, the committee send it to budget. Now, if it's some change in the way we do business, I'll ask Nick when he get back from his vacation, our county attorney, should we make a change on the way we've been doing business? All I can go by is what I heard on the forensic center, that it didn't pass on the state end. So I didn't want the forensic center to just die or go out and never be brought up by the commission. Keep the project going. I asked for the forensic center to be put on the agenda. Number one, I think every commissioner should know that it was defeated by the state or whatever, but we still need to show if we have a need for a forensic center in Rutherford County. And this being the Property Management Committee, all we're doing is showing that we have a need for it. That's the reason it's here, because I asked to put it on there.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a quick question? And I don't mean to confuse things, but has this run through, is it expected to, or what's the role of health and ed in this process as well? Just for my own understanding, I'm trying to sort out the different committees at this point. This would seem to go, something that would go through health and ed and public safety and us, perhaps. I'm just trying to understand.
I brought up health and ed because it concerns the health of Rutherford County, and that's the health and ed committee. Public safety aspect of Rutherford County, and I'm the one that just mentioned health and ed. But as far as this committee, we can vote to send it anywhere we want to. We can vote to kill
Mr. Chairman,
the
if I
project.
could just add one more thing.
Commissioner
We've already
Phillips.
kind of been through public safety, and public safety has blessed this building. The only difference that came out of public safety the other night related to the funding. And that's what public safety asked for back, not for permission to do it, but for the funding of it. The funding mechanism is what failed. So what public safety is not going to make a decision as to whether or not go with it, but to see if we will support the new funding mechanism for this. So it's already been before public safety months and months ago. The deal is that what we approved was contingent upon the state giving us the $16 million. Since that's not viable right now, what public safety asks is, what's it going to cost us? And that's the report that the mayor's office is going to make at budget, I understand, and then at public safety both. I don't know if I can recall anything like this before, but what the chairman is asking this committee to do is just to identify a need. Does this committee think that there's a need? Yes or no, and then it goes before budget. Is that kind of a correct scenario?
You're correct, Chairman Phillips. You're correct. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. My first thought was to make a motion to send this to the commission to get approval or consensus of the commission, get the commission to vote for it, to see if we had the support showing the need. But after this discussion, and since it has been through public safety, and Chairman, what you were saying, I would like to make a motion to send a positive recommendation of support showing a need for the Rutherford County Forensic Center to budget.
Do everyone understand the motion? Do I hear a second?
In a second.
More discussion?
Mr.
Commissioner Wilson?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm having a real problem with this. We just had a health and education meeting on Tuesday night outlining the absolute dire need to purchase land in the north end for a high school. If we're paying $70,000 an acre, and he made clear that the Board of Education, he said, with what money? I mean, we just saw a report showing how dire the situation is with schools. And let me be clear, this is my personal, this is, as Chairman Phillips says, this commissioner's opinion. When I voted yes to pursue this, it was because we were going to basically put in 6 and get 15. That's a good deal. Let's do a forensic center. We put in 6 because we had to rush to do it right now. But I felt good. 6 million, if we get 15 or 16, I can live with that. The priority has completely changed. Is there a need for a building like this? We have so many needs in this county, but the funding is very few. The funds are few. So for me, the priorities changed on, we're dealing with transfer station, $20 million plus for that, for landfill. We're dealing with needing to purchase land for schools. We have to look at an elementary school of 60, 70 million. My concern is the priority. I'm concerned on sending a recommendation to budget when I would rather recommend other things get done first, because we're not getting any deal from the state or federal government by doing this now. And that's my real concern. I'm very much struggling with wanting to send this through, and I think on the priority list, we should have a full discussion on what we think should come next. Is it the transfer station? And I've heard several commissioners in the public say that they don't expect to raise taxes again in 3 years. I'm sitting here adding up these numbers going, then we need to prioritize how to best spend this money. We have got to have schools. We have got to have a high school in the north end. We did that, and that's not my opinion. That is the data presented by our superintendent on Tuesday night. We haven't even purchased the land, y'all. That could end up being $6 or $7 million, and we need to do that as soon as possible. So I'm just having a hard time with the priority. My problem is the priority. And at this point, I'm a no on sending it to budget, because it's just the priority level. I don't want them to discuss this before. Where are we on the other things we need to do now? I was told the landfill could close in 2 or 3 years. That means you need a transfer station now. Okay, the forensic center, is there a need? Well, of course it would provide an additional service to our people, but all these things I'm being told timelines. I'm being told the landfill is going to close in 2 to 3 years. We need a transfer station now. You know, I'm being told with the population increase that we're going to have schools at 130 and 140% capacity in 2 or 3 years. Where are we on priorities before we send to the budget committee a way to figure out to pay for this? That's my concern, and I can't get past it. Tonight, I can't get past that. I need more time to really consider and see more about what kind of revenue would be produced, you know, where does this look on us having to find money for land for schools, fund a high school? You know, we had a conversation about a high school is going to be $140 million. We're looking at the elementary school of $60 to $70 million this fall. And we got people that don't want to that say we're not going to raise taxes. I'm very concerned that we're rushing. Very concerned. And I can't separate sending something to budget without the consideration of the cost. This commissioner can't do that. I have to think about what's the priority level and the cost that I'm forwarding on, you know, and if I was budget, would I want to see this come? I would be very confused on what to do with this on that committee. So that's my reason of voting no on this tonight. I want more information before I feel like I'm rushing in without a further discussion on prioritizing what's really important to come next. What is it? Is it transfer station? Is it schools? And how will that impact a possible tax increase next year or the year after? We got to get some public opinion behind this. That's just the way this commissioner feels.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to respond to that. Number one, if we send it to budget, we're not telling budget that they got to fund it with property taxes. We're not telling budget how to fund it. We have sent projects to budget that didn't even see a red penny of property taxes. Now, as far as the forensic center being in the same tone, same position as a transfer station or whatever, that's up to budget to look at all that. But it's possible, it is possible that this forensic center could be funded other ways. And it's possible that if we show that we have the need and that we want this forensic center, it's possible the state will readdress this. They have on other projects in the past. But to say that we're going to put the forensic center in the same voice with the school board, with the transfer station, with buying land, we can't do that because it may, and Commissioner Phillips know that all this may not come out of the same pot of money. In other words, that's what the Budget Committee can look at. They can look at this. If they say, well, we can't find the money, or we hadn't had the money donated, or we can't do anything with the money, that will be the report, bring back to the commission that we're still looking. Case in point, and I keep bringing this up because it was a $72 to $75 million project that everyone hollered, we can build a school with this money. We don't need that judicial building. It's just taken away from our property taxes. And lo and behold, once we said that we had the need for this judicial building, budget, and everybody was looking into how are we going to fund this, lo and behold, we came up with a way to fund it, and it didn't involve no property taxes. There's other ways to fund projects within this county without property taxes. I just want to get that straight. But sending it to budget is all we're doing is showing the need. That's it. If you don't want to show the need, if you want to tell your constituents, no, we don't need a forensic center. We don't need it. It's not needed in this county. If it's not needed in this county, vote no. But don't let your rationale be that it's all funded and coming out of the same pot, because it doesn't have to, and we have had other projects that didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Phillips, thank you for your remarks, and I mean that. We've worked together a pretty short time, only about 10 months now. I can tell you that whenever I bring a proposal or an idea to the county commission, I have spent an incredible amount of time with our finance director, Mike Smith, about those very questions that you bring up. As a matter of fact, the bulk of the conversation and time I spend is how do we mitigate the cost associated with whatever the proposal is. Unfortunately, with schools and with law enforcement and with public safety, there aren't opportunities to mitigate cost. It's just a flat-out expense to the community, period. That's it. If it costs $130, $140, $150 million to build a school, plus the millions of dollars to staff and operate that school, that's the problem we have with growth. That's it, growth. And we've been talking about that since I was sworn in. How does growth pay for itself? Public safety, how does growth pay for itself? Law expansion of patrol officers on the street, how does growth pay for itself? Every now and then, we have an opportunity to meet the growth needs and mitigate those costs. But I can promise you this, I'm not going to raise property taxes next year or the following year. And I'm not going to do anything and bring any proposal before this committee or any other committee of the county commission that would in any way jeopardize that. I won't do it. I appreciate your scrutiny, and I really, really mean that. We all need to have that same sense of how do we prioritize things, what's important. We only have, like you said, a certain number of dollars. But like Chairman McAdoo said, all those dollars aren't competing out of the same bucket. And that is the case with the Forensic Center. It's not competing for the same dollar as our school system. And I can promise you this, Michael Smith and I have spent hours making sure that this facility, like the transfer station, like other things that we are doing, doesn't have an adverse impact on what occupies 75% of our budget, and which is what we're statutorily required to do, is that educate our children. And that's not going to be sacrificed under any set of circumstances. As a matter of fact, I'll be meeting with Dr. Sullivan very soon, not just for a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan, but we're talking about a 10-year plan. I won't be sitting up in here in 10 years. That I can promise you. But it's our responsibility to lay that groundwork so that our successors can follow in and do the same. And so, I mean, I respect your no vote. I'm not necessarily even trying to change your vote, but I want you to know that you're not going to find anybody in Rutherford County government who's more physically conservative than I am. And I'm taking very serious the fact that we do have a certain amount of dollars, and we just, with the 26 tax increase that I proposed and you supported, thank you, we set the table straight. It would be absolutely irresponsibly catastrophic for us to jeopardize what we've just done. I won't do it. I won't do it for anything, anybody, any school. We've set the table. But what we've done is we've given ourselves an opportunity to do it and do it right, and that's what I'm going to endeavor to do to the best of my ability. So thank you for your attention.
Commissioner Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me say this, and I've listened. Thank you both for your comments. I've listened to you diligently. I think my issue here is forwarding it to budget. If I'm listening to what you're saying, this is about to get it to budget, let them figure it out. That's what I've heard. Is that correct? Let them figure out where the funding would come from. We just decide if there's a need. That's what I'm hearing from everyone. Doing that with a positive recommendation, for me, sounds like that is saying, I want you to figure that out with a higher priority. I would feel more comfortable, if we're going to forward it to budget, to put it in the pipeline with a neutral recommendation, because I don't believe, is there a need for it? Will we serve citizens if we have a mass casualty event and we have a forensic center? Absolutely. I think everyone would agree. But with a positive means, I feel like that's putting it through that we're saying, let's get on it right now. I can't believe that that's a priority without further discussion. I can't, without further discussion, say, is this the thing we spend money on first? What's the priority? So I don't know how other commissioners feel. I could make an amendment to change that to a neutral motion, to forward the budget with a neutral recommendation, meaning that I don't recommend positively to go find the money to fund this, but get it to budget to get in their pipeline. So is there any other comments? I'm happy to make that motion, but I would like to hear some other comments, because we want to get all these right. And I would certainly want to send something to budget with the explanation I have been given here today. It is that it is going to budget to sit in a pipeline to figure out how to do it one day. I can live with that. But to say I want it before these other things, I can't do that right now. Not without further examination of costs and seeing what and how much we're going to spend in future budgets, because we do need these other things. And it just seems too fast. I have no information. I walked in tonight. It's the first I've heard of this. $12 to $14 million on this. I haven't even had time to watch the public safety meeting. I've been too busy with our other stuff. So just need more time before I say yes on that in positive. So are there any other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Urban.
I'd like to propose an amendment that would basically say, would replace, with all respect, I guess it's a subsidiary amendment or whatever it's called, Commissioner Johnson's, that basically says, the Property Management Committee finds, based on the information provided, that there exists an apparent need for a forensic center, including a morgue, in Rutherford County, and in recognition of such need, forwards its finding and this matter to the Public Safety, Health and Ed, and Budget Committees for consideration of the budget and financial aspects of this, as well as a further analysis of the needs of the county in this regard.
Do I have a second on the amendment? Davis and second the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment?
Get some supper, guys. I'm growing more uncomfortable with we're pushing forward. I'm uncomfortable that we're not talking about cost. If that's the way business has been done, I'm stopping that tonight. If it's a law, then I can't stop it. If it's tradition, I'm stopping it now. This committee, if we're going to forward something, we need to understand the cost. And if the cost analysis needs to be performed by public safety, I need to hear that before I can vote on this. I'm a no. I'm a no to the amendment. I'm a no to the original. And I hope that there are four other no's. We need to know the cost before I send it to budget. Some inkling of size, cost. We've got a random $12,500 to $15,000. We've got $12 million to $14 million, including FF&E. We've got 330 deaths. We don't know, other counties may or may not come. We don't know if they will. We're spending $759,000 a year in autopsies at $2,300 each. If we get 1,000, then we're going to raise $2 million. What's the department size going to be? Is the department going to be based on 1,000 or 500 autopsies? I'm not prepared. Despite the incredible diligence that Ms. Martin and Mr. Hudgens have presented to us, incredibly diligent and patient, and Commissioner Chairman Reed for years have been presenting this. I hope that this does not leave this committee with a recommendation on a we've got to stop sending stuff forward with a recommendation and not having any idea of its cost. If it began with the public safety buildings, then it should have stopped then. They started out at $64 million, $4 million each. We had free money, therefore we're going to build 6. They went from $4 million to $8 million. I understand now we don't have enough money for Del Webb. We may not even have enough money for the 5th one. So now we're going to the market to borrow money. We now, potentially, I was uncomfortable with the staffing of the public safety buildings without knowing how many staff we needed. Now we're funding 30 firefighters and EMS people a year. I'm not even sure how many calls they make, but we're funding them. We anticipate funding all the other fire halls as they come online in the near future, the last of which we don't even have enough money to build. So with that history, I don't want to send another item forward without knowing its cost, without knowing the size of the department, without knowing without knowing how many autopsies the department may do. Can we limp along for a period of time until we find that information? Maybe we have to. And I hate to say that to Carl and Denise because of how diligent they've been.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, in response to Commissioner Dodd's request to knowing the cost, you will never know the cost until we go to bid. You won't know the cost until we go to bid, which is why you have a $12 to $14 million range. That's the range. We won't know the cost until we go to bid. You won't know the cost you won't know the ability to go to bid until you architecturally design the facility. That will take approximately 9 months. What the bid will take another 30 to 90 days. So we won't know the cost for 1 year. And you won't know the cost until you take those iterative steps. And so we have given this committee a range based on the conversations I've had with Bart Klein, who is somebody we've worked with before. So when I say, do we have a cost? No, sir. Do we have a expected range? Yes, sir. Do we have expected size? Yes, sir. But some of this stuff will be unknown until we endeavor to take the time to determine those costs through the architectural design and engineering process.
I'd like to make another statement. I'm glad you made the statement you made, being on health and ed. How many times I've had schools and land and everything to come to me without an actual cost from health and ed? How many times?
Numerous times, and we discussed diligently the cost in health and ed. we discuss the cost before we forward it to budget. We've had conversations of cost through the Board of Education. Board of Education, how much? How much per square foot? How many square feet? How many students? Let's see your spreadsheet, your 5-year plan, your 3-year plan, your 10-year plan. We anticipate, what is it going to cost for design? What's it going to cost for land? What's it going to cost to operate and staff? We have those conversations. We revise those numbers as we go. We don't send to budget a random, we need a school. We send that, we have a design, we funded a design, we do a whole lot of work, and we have a abundance of cost discussions at the committee level. At the committee level, with information from the Board of Education. We have the engineer of schools stand before us and talk about price per square foot. We discussed, do we want a membrane roof or do we want a liquid membrane? We have those conversations before we pass it to budget. And I think that's most appropriate. I hope that my vice chair can concur. We talk finances, Mr. Wilson. Do we not? Do we not talk how much things are going to cost before we forward them?
The last 2 schools we had, I don't think Mr. Wilson, Commissioner Wilson was on the committee, but the last 2 schools we had, I know I was on the commission, and I don't think I was asleep, is that a lot of times we didn't even get a report from Health and Ed on the Christiana, Walter Hill project. It came directly from school board and was presented to the full commission. But needless to say, I can't remember coming out of Health and Ed with the exact cost, the exact number of personnel. You put me in a range, and the range was mentioned tonight on this particular project. Unless I missed something, the range was mentioned. So to say that we're sending this project to budget without a cost recommendation and all, then we probably just need the county attorney to look at how we got our committee structure set up. In other words, if you want the property management to get in the cost and all this good stuff before they send it forward, then we need to have some changes made. And I've been doing it wrong for the last several years.
Then it may be that time. And I hope this is a no. And if it's a no, I will discuss, can public safety do some analysis on the size of the department before we start building them a building.
Any other discussion on the amendment, Commissioner? I'm gonna give it to Anthony Johnson because
I guess for clarification on my motion that's being amended, my motion was to send this to the Budget Committee with a positive recommendation in support of the need for a Rutherford County Forensic Center. The purpose of that was not to have them say, yes, we're going to build it, and that's it, and it's going to come to the commission, we're going to vote on it without knowing the cost. Mayor has said staff and the mayor has worked on the numbers. They'll continue to work on the numbers, which I assumed. They would continue to work on the numbers along with the Budget Committee. They would bring the numbers to the Budget Committee and they would hash it out before it would come to the commission for the vote. That would be the time to vote yes or no on this. Right now, I think we're all in agreement. There's a need. We've all said, even the ones in opposition to this motion have said there's a need. That's not saying it's prioritizing this over anything else. It is a need. And this is getting the process, well, it's already started. It's been to Health and Ed, and they were in agreement with the original. But like the chairman said, there are other ways that funding will come in for this, possibly. And budget, it's their job to figure this out along with the mayor and his staff. That was the purpose of this motion. I disagree with having a neutral recommendation because that sounds like, to me, if I'm neutral on something, I don't really care. I'm neutral. That's what it means to me, is I don't really care. And I do care. And I know, Commissioner Wilson, you care. I know that. That's not what you meant, but that's the way it comes off to me. If I say, well, I'm neutral on this, that's just me. If I tell you I'm neutral on it, I can go either way. I don't really care, you know, honestly. That's why I say with a positive recommendation for the need, not for a prioritization of this. It's just for the need.
I got to make one statement. We went out of session to let Ms. Martin speak, and we never did vote to come back in session.
Move to come back into session.
Motion made to come back in session. Do I hear a second? Second. All those in favor? Okay, now continue.
Can these motions be grandfathered in?
Amendments and everything.
They'll need to repeat their motions
The amendment.
and amendments. Well, yes, you'll have to do.
Motion first.
Motion first, then the amendment.
But we were still out of session, so those will be null.
Okay, so we're in session now.
Right.
Now we are.
I would move to send this to budget, positive recommendation, support of a need for a Rutherford County Forensic Center.
A second.
Got a motion and a second.
I was trying to add some more wording, I just couldn't get the word.
Okay.
With no implications of this meaning to prioritize over any other county project.
Okay. Do everyone understand the motion? I hear a second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Boyd.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
Go ahead, Commissioner Irvin.
The Property Management Committee finds, based on the information presented, that there exists an apparent need for a forensic center, including a morgue, in Rutherford County, and in recognition of such need, forwards its finding and this matter to the Public Safety Committee, Health and Ed Committee, and the Budget Committee for consideration of the budget and financial aspects of this, as well as further analysis of the needs of the county in this regard.
Okay, do you understand the amendment? Second that amendment. Commissioner Davidson? Any discussion on the amendment? More discussion on the amendment? Not call the roll for a vote on the
Commissioners, this is on the amended motion.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if this passes, it would replace. It's intended to replace Commissioner.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
No.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Chairman McAdoo.
No.
The ayes have it. Motion
Read that
passes.
amendment out again.
Read your amendment again, please, sir.
Property Management Committee finds, based on the information presented, that there exists an apparent need for a forensic center, including a morgue in Rutherford County, and in recognition of such need, forwards its finding and this matter to the Public Safety Committee, Health and Ed Committee, and Budget Committee for consideration of the budget and financial aspects of this, as well as a further analysis of the needs of the county in this regard.
Okay, the amendment passed. Now, want to vote on the original motion.
Well, the subsidiary, it's a motion that,
Mr. Chair, Parliamentary Procedure, if I may, the amendment only changed the motion. You still have the now amended motion to vote on, so you'll need a second, a motion and a second on the amended motion.
well, with respect, point of order, I believe that's the subsidiary motion that takes over in its entirety the motion.
It does,
Under
but
Robert's
you
rules.
just voted on the amendment. You didn't vote on the original motion, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, we can go through the process, but I believe we went through this in the commission.
The amendment passed, so
Yes,
now
the
you're
amendment passed.
now all you're doing is voting on the original motion as amended.
Right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
sounds good.
So which,
It
Mr.
replaced,
Chairman?
it replaced Commissioner Johnson's motion in its entirety.
It didn't replace it. It will replace it if
It
we
will
vote that
replace it
way.
after we vote on the original motion. As amended. Right, but we got to vote on it.
A yes vote, and tell the people, don't talk, please. I'm hearing chastisement coming from behind us. I'm not, if I'm hearing right. A yes vote is to send it to the three committees you mentioned. It's seeking financial understanding and
Yes, my amendment replaced in its entirety Commissioner Johnson's motion. So now we're voting on presumably this motion again as amended. So it's the same thing again, basically.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
So if we vote to do this, which committee does it go to first? There should be a priority of which one it would go to first for them to send it on to the next and to the next, because it seems like that's what we're trying to get down to, but it's not being said.
Commissioner Irvin?
To me, it's just complicated, the issue. I'm simple.
Presumably, it would simply go through the regular process in the order of meetings, according to the schedule.
Which is?
I'm not as familiar with.
And then public safety will meet next, and then health and ed will meet
Third.
after that. I can give you those dates if you want them.
Management.
But what I'm hearing from this amendment is it's not to go to budget before it goes to these other committees. That's my point. My purpose was to get this to budget, let them hash out where the money would come from, so forth. Then it would go back to the committee for them to vote to do it. after the mayor and the staff and budget had figured out where they could get the money. If we can't get the money, it's moot point. That's really why I wanted to take it to the commission first and get approval to continue with the process.
Irvin?
Mr. Chairman, I would be pleased to add a further amendment that says, instead of the language to the Budget Committee, or to the Public Safety Committee, Health Education Committee, and Budget Committee, I would be pleased to add, or to replace that language.
Point of
Order
with-
by Commissioner Johnson.
Our-
Point of order.
Our
Go ahead.
discussion is on the amended original motion.
I'm making
It
another
wouldn't
amendment.
be, it wouldn't be
I'm making another
correct to
amendment.
amend it again before we even, you've already said we need to vote on the amended motion.
Well, presumably there's the motion, there is a second, there's discussion. During the course of that discussion, in view of the discussion, I'm going to respectfully clarify that instead of the language that it's, let's see, forwards its finding in this matter to the Public Safety Committee, Health Education Committee, and Budget Committee, I'm going to replace that language to forwards its finding in this matter to the Budget Committee first, the Public Safety Committee second, and then to the Health and Ed Committee. And so in other words, I'm amending this piece of it to accommodate what I believe to have been the discussion on, or by Commissioner Johnson.
Why wouldn't we just simplify it and you rescind your original amendment and fix that?
It's already passed. The amendment's already passed.
The amendment.
Based on the interpretation of the rules so far, we have to go back through the process. So as part of that process, we have a amended motion, and then that's open, that's been seconded, and it's been open for discussion. And then I have just made an amendment to take into account, proposed an amendment to take into account the concerns raised by my fellow commissioner.
I heard clarification, which committee does it go to first? The clarification was to go to the committees in order that they meet. And if that wasn't what was stated in there, that can be adjusted, making that clarification, and we can go on. That was your intent?
Yes, sir. Originally, the intent was just to go to those committees in the order in which they regularly meet. Happy to make that amendment formal if you wish.
Okay, based on that, then we can go ahead and vote on the original motion as amended. We can continue and vote on that.
What do I know? Probably nothing. But I would just say he's clarified his intent
clarified
in the
it.
motion, and that is budget, public safety, health and ed.
Right.
And I believe that's the 10th, if I'm not mistaken. Help me,
Yes, sir, it is the 10th. Budget is the 10th of August.
10th and the 27th and 28th, or is it the 28th and 29th? 28th and 29th.
Okay. Okay, then.
Commissioner
I'm
Irving.
happy to accept that interpretation.
Commissioner Irving, your original order was public safety, health and ed, budget. So you're just wanting to amend your motion to clarify your order?
Well, the original motion was simply committee and committee and committee. I didn't specify an order. It was not my intent to
No.
specify an order, other than as they regularly meet.
Okay.
Based on further advice consideration, I'm happy to do it in the order of budget, public safety, and then health and ed. To clarify that, which I believe it's now understood works, to have it occur in that order.
Mr. Chairman, this is, we're not done with this. So typically, the county commission process as a facility like this would go through a particular standing committee or committees. The final destination within that committee process is budget committee, at which point in time, budget then refers to the full commission. In this particular scenario, Commissioner Irvin, you've got budget committee as the first landing spot, and thereby, what committee then is going to refer it to the full commission? Would it be the last committee that hears it, or can any of the committees that hear it refer it to the full commission?
Well, presumably any committee can forward something to the commission.
Understood, but you have not spelled that out, so I would assume then if it goes to budget on the 10th, the budget could then immediately send it to the full commission that following week. Is that correct? And thereby bypass the intent of the motion, which would be for health and ed and for public safety to hear the issue.
If you're suggesting that we need to add some kind of caveat.
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm looking for clarity as to the final process, which would end up in the county commission, and what does that process look like? I'm actually not suggesting anything.
Okay, fair enough. If it were to go budget, public safety, health and ed, and budget would simply be a discussion process, and then there were a resolution and a referral to the commission after that full process occurred at the second budget committee meeting, happy to do that as well. Commissioner Phillips perhaps can tell us, or Chairman Phillips can probably give us a little guidance in terms of what is, can any committee refer something to the commission? And if we make a resolution along these lines, is it binding on any other committee? And short answer, probably not. But if it were,
Commissioner Phillips?
I don't know what to say anymore. The original discussion based upon forwarding this thing on to budget. That was the original discussion. So now we're hung up on which committee gets it first. But on the agenda, the original discussion was to forward the need onto budget. So however we want to do that is I think secondary. And I think we're getting hung up on schematics. In an ideal world, okay, the proper thing would be public safety, health and ed, budget. That's probably a perfect world. But the discussion that was on the agenda was tonight was to forward the need onto budget for whatever discussion came up there. So, I don't know. The chairman can rule and has the final say, even if it's not exactly the way it's written up in Robert's Rules of Order. So the chairman has the final say-so. And if your intent was in order of meetings, I think that's all we need to do is just do that clarification and go on. If you want to go in the right process, then it probably needs to be spelled out. The ideal world would be public safety, health and ed, budget.
okay.
But the budget, that would put the budget meeting sometime in late August.
And that's why I voted yes. I just thought it was going to public safety. And then I'm hearing that my yes was unfounded. I want to defer to you, Anthony.
Commissioner Johnson?
Well, I've been sitting here thinking about the whole process and how confusing it is now. And like I said, I'm simple. I try to do it the way everybody understands it, and especially me. It would simplify the matter, seems like, if we were in agreement to just vote this down, the original motion as amended, vote it down, come back with a motion just to start the whole process over, take it to Health and Ed. Take it to public safety first. They'll decide to send it on to Health and Ed or whatever, but that wouldn't be part of the motion. That's their decision. And then they would send it on to budget. That would be the simple process, if everybody's in agreement to vote this down and then come back with maybe the motion just to do it as people think is normal to go through.
If that would make everybody happy, do it.
Call the question. Call the question.
Are we,
Call the question.
are we,
Wait a minute.
Clarification,
Want
point of
everybody
order.
clear on this?
are we,
Go ahead.
are we voting on the amended motion and then, or then,
We are voting, we are voting on the original motion with the amendment. As amended by you. Now, if you vote no on it, you're gonna kill the whole thing. And if you vote yes, but if you vote no, like they say, we can start over new.
And this commissioner intends to vote no in order to have public safety present the need and some cost analysis and a department size of a forensics department before this commissioner will entertain a building at property management level.
Let's call for a question. I'm ready to vote.
Commissioner Irvin,
no.
Commissioner Davidson,
No.
Commissioner Dodd,
No.
Commissioner Wilson,
No.
Commissioner Boyd,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Chairman McAdoo.
No.
Motion fails.
So we cleared everything off the books, per se. Now, we would,
To make this really clear,
go ahead.
instead of forwarding it on to budget with some type of positive recommendation, forward it back to public safety with a positive recommendation, should make everybody happy.
I think it's the neutral more attractive.
With a positive recommendation to do it, but with a positive recommendation of the need.
Of the need.
So is
Do I hear a motion to that effect?
I make a motion that the forensics department need be referred to public safety and request they analyze its cost, department size, and building size before referring it to the next committee.
Everyone understand the motion? Any questions on this motion?
That motion's basically just sending us back to public safety, and it's just there for whatever happens next.
Right.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? Discussion? Any discussion? Call the roll.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Irving,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Chairman McAdoo.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we made it through.
Safety.
Okay, next on the agenda, naming of county-owned buildings. I do not see Commissioner Robert P. in the audience, and it's been recommended that we move this to our August meeting, and this is naming of county-owned buildings. And for the members of the committee, Robert P., Commissioner P. had made a request to come before this committee and discuss the naming of county-owned buildings. But since he's not here, we're gonna move it on to next month. Move it on to August. Any questions on that? Okay. Next on the agenda, County Clerk's Office Security. I don't think we need to suspend the rules for her because she's definitely a part of this committee, so come on up.
It's okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for hearing me tonight. And it is a need. I've heard that tonight. So I want to emphasize there is a true need at the county clerk's office and security. I'll start off with the 319 North Maple Street location. My office shares that building with the Register of Deeds building and the property assessor. And the location of the building and the activity that goes on around the building is a great concern. And in my office at the county clerk's building, you know, we have individuals that save up, and then they buy a vehicle that they've truly wanted, and they come into the county clerk's office, and they're told they can't have a tag because the paperwork's not filled out correctly. Not everyone takes that like we would like to see. We've had situations where doors have been knocked off their hinges because they're mad. I've had people try to get back into the building, and normally the county clerk's office, is the last to leave. And on more than one occasion, you're looking at security, 4'11.5", me. So when I say there is a need, there is a true need. Not just me, but also the other offices that are located in that building. So, and without me going into other things that might put my office or any of the other offices at risk, I'd just like to say there is a need. We have a security that works the parking lot, and it has truly helped with the situation that we couldn't get any control over. And what that is we have a private company that comes in from 7:30 to 11:30 every day, and they walk and patrol and regulate how the public is parking. And the reason we have him, is because when the judicial building opened, people come into my office or the Register of Deeds office or to the property assessor's office, couldn't find parking at 319 North Maple Street because they perceived it was closer for them to park at 319 North Maple and go to the new judicial building. I asked for help, and I couldn't get any. So what I did, I had some money in my budget. I reached out and hired off-duty sheriff's department officers. And it was a proven fact that it worked. However, to pay an off-duty police officer is double of what we would pay to have a private company do the same thing that an off-duty police officer was doing. We got control over this situation. The public needing to utilize 319 North Maple can now find parking there most of the time. Until we get the Blackman, you call it the one-stop office building, open, we're lined out the door. So at the end of the month, you might have to circle a couple of times, but on a everyday, on a normal basis, it has worked. So I've said it since I've came into office, we needed security there. And I keep asking, or I keep talking about it, and finally, they put me on the agenda. So here I am, asking for help.
What are you suggesting, a security firm to replace the outside and place someone inside? Is it someone in each of the three, or someone that roams? What are you thinking you need?
We still need the person on the outside from 7:30.
Would it be replaced? Would that person, is that person still currently an off-duty? Would it be replaced by a security firm that would man outside and inside?
Okay, the security company has already replaced the outside patrolling of the parking lot, and it truly has helped. What I'm asking for, and I think those that share the building with me, we would like to have security inside that building. We've had situations to the point that where I would have to call the sheriff's office that's located across the street and have them come to the county clerk's office to get control of a situation. And that's happened several times. However, if I can't get to them, I'm it.
And I would think yours is the most vulnerable too, because everybody has to go through you. The other one's a little bit more service-oriented too. Just not everybody has to be forced. So I'm glad you're the one taking front here. What kind of cost are you seeking? What kind of cost do you think this would be if we were going to recommend it? What is your cost now for the outdoor person?
Well, that comes out of the mayor's budget.
Let me add something real quick to it. First of all, we need to decide if it's going to come out of your budget or is it going to come out of the commission budget? Because you three are fee officers, and it works a little different than the normal process. Coming out of the fee officer budget, then you just asking for us to approve the need, and fee officers can go figure out what you want to do. But if it's coming out of the commission budget, that's a different story.
I'd like to add to that. As the county clerk, I'm not supposed to sign any contract with a security company. Currently, the Crimson is who is the security company. It comes out of the mayor's budget. We need it. We need it. And at this point, whatever you decide, if you want it to come out of the county clerk's budget, I'll just be at the budget committee asking for an amended budget to cover that cost, and then each year I will just add that into mine. It does make it appear that my budget's going up and up, but at the same time, if it's going to protect 319 North Maple Street and the citizens that have to visit that office and the other two offices, I'll stand behind it. But if you all want to decide how you want to handle that, I'm open to it.
Mr. Chair.
Johnson?
Earl, I saw the need that you're speaking of when we toured your facility, and I voiced that concern at that time. And I still have that concern. And I'm in agreement with you that you need security. I was disappointed in our new building to see that we didn't have the full glass like we put in Smyrna, that I insisted we put that in when we built Smyrna for security. But that doesn't change my feelings. That's a bridge already crossed. We could have had better security with that full glass and put in the venting, but that's a bridge already crossed. You do need security. After all of this discussion that we've had tonight, and this is nothing toward you, but I feel this should go through public safety, and I just feel like we need to send this back to public safety, and maybe you address them. I'm in full agreement, wholeheartedly. You need security. That whole building needs security, but definitely your floor. So I'm just suggesting this go back to public safety. I don't think we need a motion for that. Since you still have the floor, it wouldn't be appropriate to have a motion anyway, but that's just my feeling.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Any other commissioner got the input? Commissioner Wilson?
I agree with Commissioner Johnson. I think public safety is who to handle it, to discuss that situation. I agree with that.
Got any input?
I want this, I hope this committee can voice some type of support, though. Again, I got to dismiss all the conversation we've had tonight. It's isn't about, I feel like we need to give Ms. Crowell some support, some type of motion to do what, I make a motion that when we go back in session, I have a motion to make.
We didn't go out of session, Commissioner, because she's part of this committee.
I make a motion. When you get off the floor, I'll do it. Now, I want to help you get this. I mean, you are vulnerable, and it may escalate to you need 3. I think perhaps 319 is, there's so much traffic, it's different. But right now, we're talking about 319. And let's help you get support, however you choose to do it.
And if anybody else doesn't have any questions for me, I'll leave the floor so you can talk about it.
We'll holler at you if we need.
But thank you.
You're welcome. Made that in the form of a motion?
I'm not sure where the funding would come from, but I'll make a motion that 319 receive funding for indoor and outdoor security.
Since it came before this committee, make a motion to forward it on to public safety with a positive recommendation.
Make a motion to fund security to 319 North Maple to public safety with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Motion and a second. Commissioner Johnson seconded. Any discussion? Any more discussion? Now call the roll.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Chairman McAdoo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And perhaps the county clerk's office might consider amending their future budgets to escalate safety at all 3 buildings. And I'm sure we could all entertain that. It's something for the future.
Any other business to come before the Property Management Committee tonight?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Johnson?
when we discussed, well, it's on the agenda, Florence Road outbuildings. We discussed the house that was sold. We didn't discuss what we're going to do with the outbuildings. We were shown a picture of them,
Yeah.
but nothing was discussed at what we're going to do. We put the outbuildings, we put it all out to bid or to auction, and we didn't get anything. Based on previous situations like that, when we put something out to bid or put something up to auction, I think then if we didn't have anyone to bid or purchase, we could follow another route. We weren't restricted on how we would dispose of that property. And someone can correct me, they know more about legal than I do for sure. But I feel that we could possibly put an ad in the paper that we have the outbuildings at that address, give people a date that they would submit a sealed bid to the mayor's office, and then a date that they could be opened, and it be sold to the highest bidder. Sealed bids. That's just my suggestion.
I agree with you 100%, and we're going to look into it through the mayor's office. But since the county attorney is not here, would like to just send it to the county attorney.
Well, I would move to put that in form of a motion. I move to advertise in the local paper, in a local paper, the outbuildings, Singer Road, up for bid, the highest bidder, sealed bids, be sent to the mayor's office. We'll leave it up to the, this would, of course, go through legal, and legal would word it correctly, but just, we'll put it out for sealed bid, let the county attorney draw up the papers, and it's in his hands.
Everyone understand the motion? Do I hear a second?
Could you clarify? I'm just sorry. I'm just trying to
Well,
sort this out.
it's kind of hard to clarify.
Exactly what we asked.
I would move to send this to legal. I think that makes it simpler. Send this to legal to possibly open bids through publication for a local paper. These would be sealed bids, and the wording.
Are you asking them to clean it up? I'm sorry. I'm trying
Yes,
to.
please.
Why don't you just,
You've got the gist.
To clean up the, he's
Why don't you
saying for
just send it
somebody
to
to come
legal?
take down the buildings
You just
in return for the barnwood. The barnwoods could be kind of a crafty
why don't you
thing.
just send it to
So he's
legal?
saying people would bid to come take it down. Is that what you're asking?
a motion for legal to draw up a
Right. Send it to legal and let them draw it up.
let them draw up a contract.
Right, and bring it
or
back.
wording,
Yeah,
let them bring it back to us
right.
and with the proper wording, yes, on the disposal of the Singer Road outbuildings.
Thank you.
Hey, do I understand the motion? Basically, we're gonna send it to legal, let them draw it up, and bring it back to us
Yes,
for approval.
yes.
Hey, that's the motion. Do I hear a second on it?
Second.
Boyd, Commissioner Boyd seconded. Any discussion? No discussion, call the roll.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson,
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd,
Yes.
Chairman McAdoo.
Yes.
Motion passes.
One other thing I need to bring up. Anybody else on the other business? One other thing I need to bring up on the other business, a report from CCRC, based on some information that was obtained. Would like to see that brought back in August to this committee, their report. Is that satisfactory to you, Commissioner Johnson? Other discussion? Commissioner Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, I just got a text from Jonathan Beverly. Going back to the long discussion we had over forensics, he said they voted to table that discussion until the mayor has a business plan on the forensic center. Information only.
Information only?
So now it's going back to them.
Going back to them anyway. Yes, sir.
It's complementary to that. What we did is complementary.
Very good. Any other discussion tonight? Not, Property Management Committee is adjourned.